Was Martin Luther King right? Does love have the power to turn an enemy into a friend? Does it have the power to heal? This year, we are creating an inspiring documentary, Courage to Love, the Power of Compassion, which explores the extraordinary stories of those who have chosen to do the unthinkable, love and forgive those who are most hurtful. Through their journeys, we will uncover the profound impact of forgiveness, love, not only on those offering it, but also those receiving it. In addition, we'll hear from experts who will explore whether love and compassion are part of our human nature and how we can bridge divides with those we disagree with. If you'd like to support our film, please donate at www.maitricre.com/documentary. That's Maitri Center Documentary. Hello and welcome to the Love and Compassion podcast with Gissele. We believe that love and compassion have the power to heal our lives and our world. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content. Today we're talking about compassion to and from animals. And our guest today is Penelope Smith. Since the 1970s, Penelope has been the founding pioneer for the field whose name she originated, interspecies telepathic communication. Author of the popular classic books in the field, Animal Talk, When Animals Speak, Animals in Spirit, many audio recordings, and founding editor of Species Link magazine, Penelope has held the hub of the growing community of animal communicators worldwide for decades. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in social sciences, years of training and experience on human counseling, nutrition and holistic body energy balancing methods, research into animal nutrition, anatomy, behavior, and care, plus the firsthand education from thousands of animals she has contacted. Penelope's visionary work has been featured in numerous newspapers, articles, magazines throughout the US and beyond, and she has developed true and tried telepathic communication techniques, which complement current scientific knowledge and traditional methods. Her methods foster people's ability to understand and communicate with animals on many levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. As a trailblazer and world-renowned teacher of basic and advanced interspecies telepathic communication, she has helped launch the careers of numerous professional animal communicators. Penelope feels that the sacred connection we make through telepathic communication with other species is essential for human wholeness. She believes that everyone is born with the power to communicate with other species, and that although it is long lost for many people, it can be regained for the benefit of all beings on Earth. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Penelope Smith. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being on the show. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. This is a topic I've definitely been wanting to talk about, especially around compassion to and from animals. I was wondering if you could start by telling the audience, how did you discover that you had this incredible gift?
Well, it was always a part of me. I always loved animals. It's very natural for kids to just gravitate to animals until they're stopped by other humans. You really can't keep children away from animals. And for me, I was aware of who I was, my nature as a spiritual being, why I came in, and who everybody else was. So the animals, I recognize them as fellow spiritual beings. And I communicated with them. They communicated with me. I got their thoughts and their feelings. They got my thoughts and feelings, no problem. And when people said or tried to discourage me that it was my imagination or it didn't exist, I just decided, no, you know what? I'm going to keep this. This is just too good. I love animals. And I just was not so much into people pleasing.
Yeah.
I came from a abusive background. And so the animals were kind of my lifeline. You think I was going to let go of them, who understood me, who were kind and loving, and we had fun together, including wild animals. And so I just decided, okay, I'll keep it under wraps. When kids made fun of me, I went, okay, here we go again. I'll just keep it to myself. I didn't know when I was young that, oh, I'm going to be an animal communicator when I grow up, kind of thing. No, there was no such thing. But I just said, no, well, it's a natural ability. I'm not going to give it up. What's the price of giving it up? Severe loneliness.
Yeah. 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 And it's so amazing that you found that connection with animals, especially if the people in your life weren't necessarily supportive. And it's so amazing that you were able to hold on to your gift rather than allow other people's judgment and fear, basically, if they haven't had that
Yeah.
experience, to change that. And so I think this
Yeah.
is
And
why you're the pioneer in this work.
well, it's hard because humans are social beings. We're all social beings, and we want
Mm.
our parents and people around us to approve of us, especially when we're young
Yeah.
and we're growing and everything. So, but I was very spiritual, and I just recognized the spiritual nature of things. And so it was easier for me to let go of the more social things. Of course, definitely I had wounds and scars from the childhood I had, which was not filled with love, to say the least. But, that was part of my mission too, was to heal those, turn those into love, to help all other beings. And that's always been my guidance throughout my life. Okay, everything we do to turn everything into compassion and loving kindness helps all beings on earth, past, present, and future. And that goes for humans and all species. But as we know, humans need the most help. Humans are the ones who forget who they are and really need compassion more than anybody. I mean, compassion should be our middle name, but humans really need it because we get so messed up. Our disconnections and our hurts and our woundedness and our mental orientation, that we lose our way. And so having compassion for humans who are hurt and wounded and acting it out, well, that's what the animals do for us. They give us that compassion and they go, yeah, you got it hard. Come play with me. Come learn what
Yeah.
it's like to just live in your body and enjoy it. That's what the animals show us. And still recognize yourself as a spiritual being playing a game in a particular experience, species, or whatever form of body that you have.
I really appreciate you saying that because it's so funny what we consider reality, right? Like, I know many people that don't believe that animals have souls in the same way that we do. Like, there's this misconception that there's this hierarchy of
Yeah,
like value or consciousness. Can you tell us a
I
little
know.
bit about what you've discovered in terms of whether or not this is true?
Well, that always blows me away that even very spiritually aware people will go on and on about humans being special and different than everybody else, and the animals don't know anything. But I go, they don't know. They're speaking from ignorance because they haven't communicated with the animals. It's just like when you have humans who say a certain race or a certain sex orientation or whatever is inferior. Okay, why? They are not communicating with those beings. They aren't finding out who those beings are. They're not connecting soul to soul and finding out what their plan is for their life. Well, if you can't do that with animals, then you don't know them. You have no basis to say they are ignorant. You have no basis to say they are less conscious. Then you start communicating with them, which more and more researchers are doing. They're finding the consciousness in the trees and in all the plants and animals that they considered lower beings. They're now finding, oh, there's complex communication systems here. There's complex awareness. There's emotion. There's decisions. Realize that I was young, nobody would dare say that animals had any kind of awareness of who they were, or that they could make decisions, or that they even had emotions. Blows you away. But there's still holdouts in the spiritual world who do not recognize the consciousness of all life. But if you go back to indigenous people, and they've got it all. You just go back through history with all the indigenous people, including those now, and they hold that all life is conscious. All life lives and breathes in its own way, whether it's an animal, a rock, a mountain, a river, the air. It's all alive. It's filled with the same substance that we all are, with the same life force.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the particles of energy or matter that we call matter are all the same in every being. They're all the same. They're the same particles. So what's the difference? I just go, wow, examine, talk to that other being and find out. As soon as you talk with other beings, all your judgments, your preconceptions, they start moving aside, because as long as you're really listening to the other being and accepting what they're saying, you realize, oh, this is a living, breathing, thinking being, whether it's a dog, a cat, a human, a mountain. This is a being who is conscious. So I've seen it change. I've been around for a while, and I've seen it change over the decades, how the consciousness of people has raised and raised and raised toward all life. So what people would regard animals and everything else as things, including themselves. I mean, really, they treated each other as things also.
Yeah.
Now there's so much more consciousness. So it keeps growing. So I go, those holdouts in the spiritual consciousness movement, I go, they'll wake up too. I've seen some of them. I've seen some of them change. I won't mention names, but I've watched their evolving consciousness of the life of all beings. Suddenly they'll have this awareness. Oh my goodness, they'll be in meditation, or they'll take some plant medicine, and they'll go, oh my goodness, I'm getting what the ancestors have communicated, that we all are one life, but they're feeling it. See, it's not just a concept. They're actually feeling it throughout their bodies, through their whole energy. They're feeling the connection. And that changes everything. So then they start communicating. And, many of them will have spontaneous telepathic experiences. Everybody can tap into it. Again, with our socialization, we have barriers. We have mental barriers, we have ideas that get in the way. So learning what it's all about, what telepathic communication is about, and opening to it sometimes is hard for people who are very mentally oriented.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And then for people who love animals, sometimes their own desire gets in the way. They get so intense that they don't relax and let it in. They go, I gotta have it. I gotta have it. I love animals so much. I gotta get their communication. So I've seen that over and over again. They get in their own way with their tension. Really, this is a very relaxed thing. The energy, the communication just flows through all of us. And so to tap into that requires certain ways of being. And again, all the spiritual masters know about this, the ancestors, the ancient ones, the indigenous peoples, they talk about all these states of being. How do you get in touch with yourself? Same way. So there we go.
Thank you so much for that. I think the level to which we can connect also depends on the level of connection that we have with ourselves, because it requires a level of presence. And it's so funny, and let me know your thoughts. I do feel that animals have helped us get here, in the sense of, before we didn't know much about animals. Let's say take whales or dolphins. They were persecuted and hunted, and then we brought them into these aquariums, and we grew to love them, and then realized, wait a minute, this is inhumane to keep these animals that are traveling miles and miles every day, and to keep them in this tank. And now you have this movement towards freeing these animals and ending all zoos. It seemed to kind of have to go through that journey, it seems. What are your thoughts about that? And what are the animals' perspectives on that?
Well, what I've learned the most from telepathic communication with animals, and I would say the number one lesson that I learned from animals over and over again, is compassion. They are extremely compassionate for our dilemma. That's why so many animals come up to help us, even wild animals. Obviously our domesticated animals, have made a pact over the centuries to be with us and help us. We need a lot of help. I have a thing that I tell people that I think you'd enjoy. How they have this pyramid where humans are at the top and everything else is lower. And I go, well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is a pyramid. We need the support of every other species, every other being underneath. If you took away those beings, we on the top of that pyramid would fall down. And without the conscious connection, we do fall down. We fall off. We tumble down. And Native Americans, Native peoples around the world recognize this. You call on the animals for help. You get the powers of the animals. You ask them for their powers so that you can find your way in this world as a human, so that you can remember who you are. You recognize the spiritual nature of all life and you ask it for help.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that the animals have been there helping us all the time. It's us, again, you can trace it back with indigenous peoples and other groups where they honored animals and they respected them and they called them in. They called them in to help. But then there's the majority in our Western world who just go along in their unconsciousness or on their computers or wherever else they are, rolling around in their heads and really don't have a good connection with what is around them. And so you talked about earlier how we have to have a connection with ourselves. Yes. One of the things that I do when I'm teaching people is that your closest animal friend is your own human body. Human body is an animal body, your
Mm-hmm.
closest animal friend. So get in touch with that body, because if you don't and you ignore that, guess who else you're going to ignore? The trillions of other beings. You won't be able to connect well with them. The more you honor and connect well and take care of this animal, you also then take care of the other animals. And you see this over and over again when people are eating poorly or they're overeating or they're eating junk food, their animals are also obese. Why? Because they're feeding the animals the same things. They have the unconsciousness about what is healthy for them and their animal friends. They clean up their own diet. They want to feed the same good things to their animal friends. I've seen this over and over again. As a very health conscious person, obviously I'm a maniac at feeding the best things for my animal friends. But it just follows. You wouldn't give them junk if you're conscious that it's not healthy. So all this consciousness of who we are, the animals help us over and over again. I tell people, notice, do your animals stare at you? And people, almost everybody raises their hands. If we're in a live audience, they raise their hands and they go, yeah. I said, because they're communicating with you. And you may not be getting it. So they're zeroing in, they're putting their intention across, and they're going, can you hear me? I need you to do this, or I need you to wake up, or I need you to let me go out, or whatever it is that it is they're communicating. But they've been there all along. The more we recognize them as fellow beings, fellow spiritual beings, the more they can open up to us. Because if we don't see, if we don't hear, if we don't get their communication, well, pretty soon they're going to go, well, what's the point? So they go into their world and they go, okay, all the human understands is when I bonk at the door or I pee on the floor. They understand that. Okay, so I guess I have to do that, because they don't get the soul to soul, heart to heart, mind to mind connection. So I'll do this. But as people wake up, then their animals can expand. The animals brighten up. They go, oh, there's a whole other level of communication open between my human and I now. Wow, this is fun. And now we can act together differently. So you grow, they grow, you grow together. It's an incredibly beautiful thing. And along with the communication, compassion increases totally. There's no doubt about it. The animals are with us on the journey. The plants, the trees, the mountains, the rivers, they're all with us on the journey. The more we tune into them, the happier we get, more fulfilled we feel in our lives, the more loving and gentle and soft life gets. It's not so hard at the edges. We're not struggling and fighting and competing, which is the order of the day. For most people, it's how they operate. And I wish it to be different. You know, I
Well, I
wish it to
think you
be.
using the pyramid is probably the most effective example because it's kind of lonely at the top, right? Like there's
Yeah.
less connection, less everything at the top. And then you have all of this network below that is connected. And as you were speaking, I think the more that you're speaking, the more I realized I think we would feel less lonely if we realize how much support and connection we have in this world.
Yeah.
I think we would definitely start to realize just how everything has been created to support each other because, like you said, we're all one source.
Yeah.
The one question that I did have, and you've already answered it, but I wanted to talk about it is insects, right? We kind of have this relationship with insects where they're seen as kind of enemies and pests, right? And I kind of did this experiment, but I wanted to know your thoughts. So I heard about you and your experiences. And every year we get like a whole bunch of ants and a whole bunch of flies and a whole bunch of like those ladybugs that are not really ladybugs. And I decided to communicate with the ladybugs. And actually, at one point, I felt a lot of love for the little beetles. And then they just kind of went away. But I had a different approach with the ants because I was in fear. And so I was trying to communicate with the ants, but I was like threatening. I was like, if you come back, I'm going to have to kill you because my family is going to poison you and they don't want you. And I had that fear base of like, if you see the ones with the wings and they're going to, carve into your wood and then that's going to be like a big thing. And so I approached it with that. Not only did they not leave, well, my family ended up killing some of them. They launched an attack. We
Yeah.
ended up having so many. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that didn't work. And I kind of
Yeah.
was reflecting on how I approached both different groups differently, right? So I was just
Yeah.
curious as to your thoughts about how we can
Well,
communicate with
look
those
at, I mean,
enemies.
you already
Mhm.
know. I mean, that fear just you attract
Yeah.
what you fear. So if you're going around in fear or you're projecting this anger, because it was not only fear, but you were projecting anger,
Mhm.
you do this or you're going to be in
Yes.
trouble. And
Yes.
that anger, that's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And so it stimulates a response.
Hmm.
And you had the opposite with the little beetles. You
Yeah.
went into a space of love and everything
Mhm.
dissolved. The
Yeah.
resistance dissolved, and there was no longer any game there. You weren't creating any
Yeah.
game. But with the
Yeah.
ants, you went, okay. And ants, I often say to people look to other animals, mammals, as, oh, well, they're similar to us. Primates are similar. I said, look at ants. I say, ants have big communities. They're completely social. They require and rely on their communication with each other, just like we do. I mean, they have their ant wide web.
Mm.
I mean, it's big. And they also have wars. They have
Mhm.
wars on other colonies of ants. You don't mix ants. I mean, there's all things. You start investigating ants, and I think you will find even more similarities. They also take care of their wounded. They take off their wounded when there's wars or if somebody's injured, they take them back. I mean, there's so many similarities to humans. Ants are very complex. Their societies are extremely complex, but people don't see that because they don't communicate. You start communicating with them, and boy, you will be enlightened. These are wise, incredible, intelligent beings who are also have so much similarities. So you wanna wage a war on ants? Good luck. There's nobody that can win a war on ants.
Well, I learned
Yeah.
that the hard way, but then
I
I
mean,
asked
yeah,
for,
poison everything, then you poison yourself and the earth and
yeah,
everything
no.
else.
So in the end, we ended up not doing that. I ended up having a different sort of communication. I asked for help to
Yeah.
communicate so that it
Yeah.
could be harmonious, and
Oh,
now it's
great.
all good.
Yeah.
But what that showed to me, and maybe you can give me some perspective on this, is that fear and that anger and frustration came from my doubt. I did not believe that I was in fact communicating. Let's be completely
Yeah.
honest. I didn't know
Yeah.
how to get through that doubt, and I had more to lose from an ant invasion in terms of like the belief that those carpenter ants are going to eat through my wood and there's going to cause damage and it's going so I couldn't get past the doubt that I was in fact communicating, even though I very clearly heard from the ants because they were very busy. Like I could hear, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm
Yes,
busy.
yes,
I'm
yeah.
like, okay, is that me? Or is that, am I projecting my perspective? So, how do we get through the doubt that we are in fact communicating and it's not just our heads?
Well, you try it. You keep practicing and you see the results, like you saw results.
Yeah.
And so you look at that and then you do it again and keep doing it with various species, see what happens. And you recognizing, I mean, you're very conscious, so you're recognizing your doubts, you recognize you had fear and anger. A lot of people do not. There's a place to get in before you start communicating, which is the peaceful, centered place where you're grounded with the earth. Okay, then you can communicate with the ants as equal beings rather than this, fury who's out of control. You can communicate as fellow beings. And then they'll tell you the same. They'll say, well, we have to live too. They might, they can say all kinds of things. We have to live too, and we need to chew on wood or whatever. And I just make deals with them. We communicate and I say, well, I need to protect my house. So I'm going to put this cedar oil all around as a barrier, or diatomaceous earth, or some I use non-toxic things. I'm going to put it as a barrier because I need to protect my house. I really don't want to kill you guys. So just there it is. I need to do what I have to do. I understand you need to do, and I respect your life, your colonies, you're living on the earth. And sometimes it's hard, because then sometimes the ants bite you. I mean, I have these big ants, harvester ants, who I have to be very careful because I'm a gardener, and they get very active, and their sting when they bite. Oh my gosh, it's like a bee sting. It lasts this big and it itches like man, and lasts a long time. Okay, so I don't always see that they're around. I'm busy with the gardening. I'm not watching for every ant. And they're crawling up my legs into my pants. And oh my gosh, once they bite. So, I have to be more conscious. They're just going, well, there's the big feet there, the big unconscious feet. Okay, I'll wake them up. I'll let them know you're stepping on our trail. You're stepping on a whole bunch of ants, so they let me know. And I go, right. Okay, so I woke up and now I'm more careful. I look around. Okay, after rain, they're very busy. I know that. So I watch, because they got to restore their homes underground. And I said, well, help me to be more conscious. Could you kind of, I'd like your help. Send me a message if I'm just walking around and I don't see you. And I suddenly go, oh, there's ants underneath me. So we can work in harmony about it. And, sometimes it's hard for people because they want to build in certain places. And you got the fire ants and some people don't want to kill them. Other people just want to wipe them all out. I've had long communications, and some of them are very willing to move and others are not. And they'll go, humans, who do you think you are? This is our home. We're not moving. And then others will say, well, we can move part of our colony, but, it doesn't work with humans. They want everybody to go. Humans always have to have it their way kind of thing, because they think that they're the rulers. And it really doesn't work that way, because you look at it. If we kill ourselves off with our ingestion of plastic and every other form of pollution, and animals will survive, Mother Earth will do the cleanup, and many, many animals, particularly insects, will survive and restore the earth. So who are you talking to? These are the beings that are making the world go round, the microorganisms, the insects. They make everything go round. Who are you talking to that they should move? So I work out deals with them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you're talking about is living in harmony with all beings, which we don't tend to do. It's so funny. I was contemplating if I had maybe gotten stung, my reaction probably would have been like, oh, like we got to get them out, or we got to wipe them out, because what if I got stung again? Whereas your response was, oh, okay, I have to be more conscientious. How can I deal with this more in harmony? And I think that goes to show how human beings, because of our fear and our desire not to experience any sort of suffering, we really go out of our way to try to control all of these things, and we impinge ourselves and we other things. And this is why we have the world we've created.
Yeah.
All of these isms that happen are because of our othering. Even if somebody isn't interested in animal communication, I think your work helps us be more human, just more ourselves. And I think for that, I think that's incredible. It's the connection, because we have lost ourselves so much. You can see it in our
Yeah.
wars, you can see it how we interact.
Yeah. And
It's,
it
it's
fills
hard.
in a missing piece. This is a
Mm,
terrible thing for people to be so disconnected. I mean, you
yeah.
see it in the mental illness, you see it in all the different kinds of disease that people have. It's just so much disconnection.
Yeah.
And when we step back, breathe, and relax with Mother Earth and all her beings, we find a different way. And again, I go back to the ancestors and the current native peoples, the wisdom that's there. And in the
Mm,
ancient texts and the ancient spiritual teachings, the wisdom is there on how to live on the earth. We aren't some superior being. Yes, we have tremendous creativity.
yeah.
We have things we don't even know about what we can do with our bodies. And we have tremendous lack of foresight on what we
Mm,
do, on the things that we do, on the consequences, and we pay for it. We don't
mm,
even know how we pay for it. People think disease just crops up like it's an anomaly or it just happened. And I go, well, there's causes behind these things. You do
mm,
this happens. You eat this happens. You put poisons in, this happens. You live under stress, this happens. And a lot of people just don't see the connection between their own actions. And so I feel like the more connection we can get, like even people that aren't interested in the communication, if you just look at that fly, okay, the fly lands on your hand, observe them. They're remarkable. They're amazing. And people think they're so dirty. They're washing themselves all the
mm.
time. Did you ever watch a fly? They're
Yeah.
constantly washing themselves.
Yeah.
And, I remember I had a rat companions, domesticated rats, and they were just incredible. They taught me right away. I picked them up and they said, oh, the oils on my hand. They said, you're so dirty. Oh, and they started washing their fur. You're so dirty. And I
I love
laughed
that.
because people think rats are so dirty. And
Hmm.
I kept going, it feels so terrible. Can't you do something about your hands? And I said, really, even if I wash them, I have these oils. I
Yeah. Yeah.
carry things. And the rat adjusted, my rat companion adjusted, said, okay, I got it. You're kind of greasy and we have to clean ourselves, but I won't be so frantic about it.
I had a dog that was really smelly because he had like different allergies. And I was imagining him thinking the other way about us. Do you think that souls incarnate into human beings and then animals and then different things? Or that?
They have their choices. Now I've communicated with a gazillion beings that have gone on. I'm very aware of my own past lives. I'm very aware that beings reincarnate and they have choices. It's not like certain systems that say, again, humans are superior, everything else is inferior, it's a punishment. Let's not. I remember one being said to me why he was a dog. He said, well, I've been human many times before, but I wanted to have a lifetime where I could really live the love, where I could
Mm.
completely express my love. I could be completely in love and express it and have it accepted.
Mm.
And now I can do that. And I can completely love and smile, and everybody smiles back at me, and I'm full of love. I feel complete. And it kind of gave me the picture of the dog as being superior. Now, the dog didn't think this, but I looked at it and I go, well, that's a higher state, or a bigger, wider state of being, is to be completely in love while you're incarnate. In the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
state of love, in the state of love
Mm-hmm.
all the time. even while you're running around and scratching your fleas and eating your food, all the things that we have to do as physical beings, the love is always there. And I just went, well, that's what we learned from dogs.
Yeah. That's why it's like dog spelled backwards is God. Like, why is that?
Yeah,
Are
exactly.
you a vegetarian? Are you a vegan? Can you consume animals and still kind of have that love and compassion for them?
Well, I communicate with my animal body just as I communicate with other bodies, and I give my body what it needs to be healthy. At earlier places in my life, if I didn't have meat, I would get very shaky. I would not be able to do my work. The amount of stress of traveling around the world teaching, meat fortified me, and I would talk to the animals and they would say, eat. I mean, I would have sometimes I would not want to eat because, again, I would not want to hurt animals. And at the same time, I would find myself followed by this cow. I would see the cow wherever I went. I said, okay, I got it. I got it. Thank you. And when I ate the cow, it was like manna from heaven. My whole body was like filled with strength, with energy, and it was the right thing. And I thanked the cow. Again, this is similar to how Native peoples do it. I thank the cow.
Yeah.
And yes, I understand the system. I understand the factory farming and horrendous. And at the same time, we have to take care of our animal forms. So as my body has changed, my life has changed. I'm not running around the world. I'm not doing what I used to do. And also my body has changed hormonally. Obviously, I'm older. I have needed less. And so I'm pretty much vegetarian. You know, again, there's times when my body wants a little fish or wants a little of this or a little of that, but very little. I also worked as a holistic energy balancer, and I worked with nutrition. And I saw that bodies changed all the time. Humans are omnivores. Obviously, you look around the world, humans eat everything, and they can't survive, especially in cold climates, without eating animal. So I looked at it and I went, you know what? All animals eat to be healthy. Now, humans eat unconsciously, you know, we eat junk food that kills us and all this kind of thing. More conscious you get. If you eat consciously to be healthy, your diet will change over your life. But you don't see animals denying themselves what they need. The raccoon doesn't go, oh, well, I shouldn't eat this little bird. No, I'm going to eat this little bird. And then I'm also going to eat plants. And I'm also going to eat this, you know, because it's good. And it's what, let's say, God has given me. You know, the divine, the order of life has given me. But we do so much unconsciously. If people ate consciously, you would have very little meat eating compared to what there is now. Much of the meat eating that is done out of habit, is done out of unconsciousness, is done out of advertising. You know, and if people get more conscious, you would, you know, if you look at the longest lived people in the world, like the Hanzas and other people who lived very simple lives, of course, they exercised a lot too, but they ate little bits of everything. So they ate a little bit of goat and a little bit of yogurt and a lot of plants. And, you know, but it wasn't this unconscious kind of thing. They ate according to what they grew, according to what they raised. Again, I've talked with animals. I'll just give you a conversation that will illustrate how animals have enlightened me on the subject. And I've written very consciously and truthfully in my books about it. And some people will come up very righteously and say, oh, you're a killer, you're a this. I said, well, you know, we have to kill to live. You know, you're killing plants. Plants are just as alive as animals. They feel as much as animals. And people go, oh, no, that's not true. Well, communicate with them and you'll find out. Okay, all animals and plants have to kill to live. I mean, it's part of life. It's all enmeshed in there. So I'll tell you what this rabbit taught me. I was teaching in Switzerland. I was on this farm and we were holding the class at the farm. And so there were cows and there were horses and there were all different kinds of farm animals. which was very beautiful. I really love being around all kinds of animals. And there were also rabbits. And my first thing was, wow, what beautiful rabbits. And I thought, because I have animal companions, had animal companions who are rabbits, I first thought, oh, they're companions. And I went, wait a minute. No, there's a whole bunch of cages and it's in the barn. These are food rabbits. Okay. So they were beautiful rabbits. I mean, their cages were immaculate, filled with beautiful hay. Everything was pristine. We're in Switzerland, you know. I mean, they're taking good care, and it's pristine.
Definitely.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I decided I would talk to the rabbit about how he felt about being a food rabbit, because it was real obvious he was a food rabbit. So I said to him, just asked him about his life. He said, my life is so good. People take such good care of me. I have, and he could see out of his cage, which again, there were a lot of cages, little hutches, little cages next to each other. They were wooden with wire. And he could look out. I can look out every day and I watch the wild rabbits and I watch how they always have to be on guard and they struggle and they usually have a very short life. I watch them get taken by hawks. I don't have any of that problem. I get to lead this beautiful life of meditation, you know, where I'm taken care of. And then my death is very swift. And I said, oh, okay, I understand that. And then the rabbit said to me, and you too will be eaten. And I said, well, what do you mean I'll be eaten? I mean, I'm not a food animal.
You're like, what's happening in Switzerland that I don't know about?
Yeah. No, I didn't think that, but I'm going, wait a minute. So the rabbit said, no, you too will be eaten. And then I saw it. My body will be eaten by microbes. It'll be given back to the earth. It will all fall apart as nutrients. It will go back into basic nutrients, giving back to all the animals, all the plants, all the earth. There is nothing that doesn't get eaten. I got it so clearly. And again, the rabbit showed me and told me about it's how your life is that counts. And so I always gauge our systems of killing animals by that directive. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they get to live a good life? So when you're talking about regenerative agricultures and the cows are all out on beautiful pastures and they get to raise their babies and they get to live a good life. Okay, that's a life. Okay, then we have to deal with the factory farming. Now that's something humans do. And the amount of it is just really abominable. But why is the amount abominable? Because people aren't eating consciously. I really do feel if people ate consciously, you would find a lot of people getting in tune with their health. Again, that's a long shot because people are not interested in their health. They're just eating their horrible food and dying horrible deaths from cancer and every other thing because of their unconscious. Okay, but the people who want to be conscious, you start to be conscious and you'll eat differently, but you may not be vegan. Even being very conscious, you may not be vegan because your body is telling you, I need this amount. Somebody pointed out to me that the Dalai Lama, his doctors advised him for his health to eat some meat. Now, this was not part of his spiritual orientation, but it was part of, let's look at it. The spiritual orientation is the whole thing. Our bodies, our whole being is all part of it. So I kind of go, yes, there are contradictions in our human life. Yes, who would want to kill animals, you know, or hurt them? But again, I've learned a lot of different things from people who hunt, from animals who hunt, and what killing is and what it isn't. And I juggle all these things together and just do for myself what will help me to be healthy. And again, I'm really happy at this time because I tried to force myself to be vegetarian at one point in my life, and I really did not do well. I went for 7 years and I was getting less and less energy, feeling bad. And I talked to the animals, the plants, and they started me with eat from the sea. And I said, well, you mean like sea vegetables, you know? No. We mean the ones that swim in the sea. And then they started showing me pictures of cows, you know, and then I got much stronger. So, you know, I just go, I cannot ignore my animal body. I understand there are billions of animals being killed. This requires an effort from all of us. It's not just one person. And again, if we scaled our meat eating way back, we would still be healthy for those who need meat to be healthy.
Mm.
And we would have a whole different system. You wouldn't have to have the factory farming. I've learned so much from animals who are killed consciously by conscious people who actually love them and raise them healthily and then kill them. I have learned from them. It's a whole different experience than when let's not even talk about picture factory farming. It's horrendous. So as I said in my book, When Animals Speak, I said, to me, the focus should be on, let's change the way we treat animals in their whole lives. Let's change the whole system. And then we have to raise the consciousness of people, not by just telling them it's bad or you're bad or it's wrong or you're wrong, but by raising the consciousness of what your own body actually needs, not by habit, not by advertising, but by what it actually needs. And you'll find that a lot of how people operate in feeding their body is by addiction. The sugar, the meat, the alcohol, all the rest, a lot of it is addiction. So we're talking a long way to raise the consciousness of many, many beings. But I think education is the way, not beating people over the head and telling them they're wrong, but education is the way. And again, at this stage of the game, I am very grateful that I have to eat very, very little animal to be healthy. But I'm at a whole different stage in my life. I couldn't have done it earlier on when I was menstruating and, when my whole needs were very, very different. In fact, my family on the female side, tends to be anemic. Without meat, you're pretty much dodging a bullet.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Again, everybody's different. And I learned that as a health counselor. Everybody was so different, and they were different when they had diseases. And as they got better, they were different, and their diets need to change. So I can't go one size fits all. I understand how people can get very absolute, but I find that absolutes really don't work real well. It's the duality. This is wrong. This is right. This is what causes our conflicts and our wars. And so if we go into more of how do we balance it? Just like we talked about the ants. Well, how do we balance it? I need to put some cedar oil around my house or diatomaceous earth because I need to protect my house. Okay, you guys, you got all this space. I respect that. Oh, but I need to do what I have to do. Can we get along? Great, we get along. They don't invade the house. The whole thing, it works. So can we work out some kind of balance with this? There's organic agriculture. People think that animals aren't killed and when they're eating plants. You're responsible by eating plants for the life of millions of animals who are run over by tractors, who their homes are taken away, babies that aren't seen getting mashed, all the animals you're eating in your food. People don't realize there's tons of insects in your plant food. Mixed into your grains. If you're talking about flour, for Pete's sakes, insects aren't meat. Well, they're animals. They're not plants. So, we have to look at it sort of in a balanced way. And yes, there are contradictions. And yes, we have to learn to live with death. To make life as good as possible and eliminate as much suffering as we can as possible. That's a compassionate way. And there aren't absolutes. I can't walk through life without hurting somebody. I'm stepping on ants. My own body is killing microbes constantly just to keep it healthy. It's killing parasites, microbes, is killing off its own cells, just to keep the body healthy. How can I be different if I'm living with this body? How can I be different? No, I'm subject to the cycles of life and death, as is every other animal, as is every plant, as is every mountain, as is the air itself. It's complex. It's not yes or no. And yet I get with many people saying, well, I'm not talking to you again, or I'm not going to read your books if you're not this way. I go, well, I'm sorry. I have learned a lot from talking with animals. And I don't just side with the animals who eat plants. I am
Mm.
on the side of everybody.
I
The
love that.
carnivores who are dripping blood, and my cats who will tell me how good blood tastes. I'm
Mm.
not rejecting them.
Yeah. I think you made so many important and powerful points. I mean, you're talking about living in harmony, right?
Yeah.
Like not overeating, not over consuming, living in harmony with nature. And you're right, nature does have a cycle. Animals eat other animals. Like that's just part of nature. So we're honoring who we are. If people choose to be vegan or vegetarian, that's their choice. But I love what you said about really asking your body, what does it need? And actually doing it from a place of honor. Like my family makes fun of me, but I do say to my family members and say, I want the animal that we're going to eat to have had a good life. I
Mhm.
want that positive energy and that love that they experience to come through me, not animals that have been harmed or hurt.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I also acknowledge that death isn't really what we think, right? I don't know if animals perceive death the same way. We think that dying is the worst thing that could ever happen to us. Whereas I think one of the things I learned from my dog is that it's like death is just sort of the next experience, right? It's a new, different. His death in particular had the worst impact on me, not on him. And I had a hard time letting go. So, what have you learned from the animals about their perspective on death?
Well, take a look at it. We go on. The animals are aware of this. All beings are programmed to survive with bodies, all bodies
Yeah.
of all kinds. All bodies want to survive. We're
Mhm.
programmed. That's the major program in our bodies. All the cells are saying survive, survive.
Survive.
How can we get healthy? How can we live a good life? How can
Mhm.
we, get through this disease, et cetera, et cetera. So everything is programmed to survive. So the rabbit runs away from the predator. But
Yeah.
when the predator comes down, the rabbit leaves the body and goes,
Mm.
okay, well, that body just fed a hawk. I'm going to be a rabbit again because I really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
so immediately looks around and goes, may spend some time in the spiritual realm, but I find that animals who live short lives often they'll recycle very quickly. And they
Mm.
look around, and I've met rabbits over and over again. I live with desert cottontails, and I know a lot of them, and I recognize them when they come back again. He said, here I am again. This little baby bunny comes up to me. Here I am again. I said, yeah, I remember when you left, I found their bloody body with the guts lying out,
Mm.
you know, and I'm glad you're back again. But at the same time, that body fed a fox or a coyote or whoever it was meant to
Yeah.
feed. So they just let go.
Mm.
Again, a lot of the suffering is alleviated because they can let go. They just go, oops, that body's gone. It's not coming back. It's damaged beyond repair. Okay, it's feeding a coyote right now. Great. I'm out of here. On to the
Yeah.
next.
On to the next
So
one. Yeah.
yeah, on to the next chapter. And when you communicate with animals in the spiritual realm, like your dog, all the animals that have gone on, they'll give you a whole different perspective about how wonderful their life was, how grateful they are to you, how they want to continue taking care of you. They're like your guardian angels now. They're looking
Mm.
after you. They're going, wow, that was a trip being a dog. And wow, I'm here expanded and full of joy. Now, in our lives, and this goes for all animals, plants, nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to be tortured. There isn't anybody. Does anybody volunteer? Okay, make me suffer. No, this is not the
Yeah.
usual thing. If somebody volunteers for an experiment or something, they're doing it for some greater purpose, or they're
Mm.
helping another being. They know it's going to hurt, but they're helping somebody else. Okay, that's a whole different thing. Then that alleviates your suffering right there when you're doing service. But let's just look at it. We are all beings in this together. We're all going to give up our bodies at some point and be food for the earth. Whether it goes through other critters or whether it goes direct to the earth, we're going to be food for the earth. And that's
Mm.
the way it is. So how can we live in the most harmony? So there's a whole bunch of systems that can be changed. If that's your calling to work on eliminating factory farming, or first educating people on how they're killing themselves with their food. If they can learn how to be more healthy, they will eat a lot less of the animals. Definitely. I mean, I can guarantee that, because you look at the longest lived people, they don't eat great amounts of anything. They eat this in portions, and it's all regulated by the amount of exercise and everything. It's a balance with the earth. And so if we move in that direction, we move in communication, you'll learn a lot from the animals. And talk to food animals. People go, oh, if you talk to food animals, it must be horrible. Well, it's horrible if they're waiting in line at a factory farm and they hear their fellow cows screaming. Yes, that's horrible, but it doesn't mean their life was horrible, but we have to change the part that is horrible, the part that makes it a long suffering and unconsciousness, which is very different than killing an animal straight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure.
I'll just tell you a story.
Yeah.
This farmer who I talked to, he had geese that he raised. Okay, so at Thanksgiving, it was time to kill one of the geese for the dinner. So he said he loved his geese and they were nice and well taken care of and nice and fat.
Yeah.
And he said, so he got his axe and he went up to the geese and he said, and again, they were raised all sort of the same age and they were all very plump. And he said, who will come to be dinner? And the geese would lay their head down on the chopping block. Now, this may sound very far-fetched, but it's not when you're in touch. And he cut off their quickly. It's done. The other geese were not even traumatized because everybody was in a different kind of harmony. Another story from Findhorn, because I knew Peter Caddy, who was a co-founder of Findhorn Garden in Scotland. And he would say that when it was time for the goats, and again, they ate different kinds of animals, they would ask, who is ready? And they would picture maybe a young fat goat or something like that. And that goat would not come forward and say, no, it's not me. I'm happy living right here. And another goat would come forward and they say, okay. And so there's an honoring there. It's a whole different thing. And Native Americans would go too. They would pray before they would do a hunt. And they would say, please, we need food and clothing for our tribe. Who will come forward? Who will be able to help us? A whole different thing. And some people may still say, well, it's still death. It's still this. Well, those are the absolutes. Let's look at it. Death is a part of life. You got to face it in some form. All of us do. Now, I'd rather go with how the animals who are free, the wild animals have a lot to teach us on death and clean death and recognizing predators and being killed, that it gets warped in domestication. And we're domesticated animals. We're not, obviously not wild animals. We're domesticated. And it gets warped, very warped in domestication. So we need to learn how to unwarp it and get more in the balance. Yes, there may come a day when we don't eat anything or we just breathe the air. I experimented with all these things. I went vegetarian, I went fruitarian, I went breatharian in Los Angeles, almost died from pollution. And I did all these things because I thought, well, okay, I'll live on energy. We're all just energy bodies. Okay, I will tell you, I had to go back to eating again, especially living in Los Angeles where I was vegetarian on the kind of air in the 70s was not what, I mean, it's still dirty, but not like it was then. It was very bad. So whatever, I did all these experiments. I wanted to have the least impact, etc. And at the same time, I would have killed off my body,
You were talking, it made me think of the animal that came forward. I got like a feeling of love, right? Like the animals love us, so that they're offering themselves. Yeah, that's what sort of came across. I have friends who did a film, it's called Rescued Hearts, and they talk about the power of horses in helping people heal from trauma. Just wondering what your thoughts are around, is it just a horse in particular, or can other animals help us sort of address our trauma?
Animals are very, very happy to help us. You just call upon them. There's more and more animals that people are recognizing help us and are supportive, and they look at us. And people are now recognizing what that look is, that look of connection and love. And then the communication continues. It's a whole different thing. I really appreciated talking to you about the food thing, because I don't get to talk to too many people publicly about this, because it's such a charged issue and people are into really making you wrong. Some people are on the whole thing. And I just have learned so much from animals. I keep thinking of all the lessons that they have taught me about the cycle of life and death. And I can't ignore that. It has to be a part of the balance.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening.
Oh, no, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I'm so happy that you were so honest about it.
Animals are also conscious. People keep thinking, well, they don't know, they're victims. They don't know anything about their life. They don't know about the ending of their life. But no, you see, they have chosen somewhere along the line, even if they were unconscious, like humans being unconscious, somewhere they'll find out that they chose every life experience, and it has a purpose. Okay, so animals go, well, this is a meat body, but I really want to be a cow. I want to enjoy it. Okay, yeah, I'm going to end up, on the plate. But I enjoy being a cow. It's really a great experience. And yes, if they end up being rescued and they live on a farm with people, wow, I mean, that's incredible. And at the same time, if they end up being killed, well, I'm not saying it's a joyful thing. But there's something in there that being is learning. I'm not here to say what they're learning. That's their journey, but I respect their journey. At the same time, part of my journey as a human is to change the things that cause suffering, do my best. And for me, it's through communication, to change those things that cause a being suffering that they didn't want and didn't really sign up for, but they learned from it. And they may never be that kind of cow again. Or it may be a path, a journey for them to learn. Or it's something for us to learn in relation. I mean, all beings are learning from each other. All species are learning from each other. Beings are learning from each other. But let's change the journey. Let's evolve it. Let's evolve it to a higher place of balance for all beings. But again, I don't have any quick and fast answers on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really appreciated that. I think what you're talking about is so important. I think one of the things that kind of kept coming out for me is I feel like the reason why people are so black and white about it is because we're afraid of death.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to deal with death. And so acknowledging that sort of death means that we would have to acknowledge and face our own mortality, which I think people are afraid of. Because, when you look about all of these systems, it's just all based on disharmony, us not being who we truly are, greed, the fact that you don't have any empathy for animals and you can just grind them up. It's beyond me, like that you could watch an animal suffer and not feel something. That only shows your own level of disconnection. My first experience was when I was very young. I think maybe 14, 15, went to a Sea World and they had dolphins and I had never seen a dolphin and I was so excited. And they had a dolphin petting area. And I, as a 14-year-old, ran up to pet the dolphin because I wanted to experience. And everybody's hands were in that tank and the animal had been sedated. And I went to put my hand in and I looked in its eye and it looked at me with so much suffering. And I pulled my hand and to watch all of those people they were just there for themselves. Like they were just, and no judgment on them because I, as a 14-year-old, ran up. That animal looked me right in the eye. And I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? What are we doing? How can we be so disconnected from our fellow beings that we can do that? And I couldn't step in any one of those things again. I I think I went once when I was older because I felt pressure to take my kids. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm violating my own values. I can't do this again. I also had to look at myself and how I was othering other beings, right? Like I killed the insects. Ate the animals. And so for me, it's like you said, it's not so black and white. We have to
Yeah.
really look at ourselves and choose to evolve and choose to love more and choose to have more compassion, even compassion for our history, right? Like I think part of that rigidness comes from shame. I historically in the past, I didn't eat consciously. I do now because I'm more aware. Thanks to social media, you see more, you are able to see how these animals are being treated. But before, as long as it was a cheaper steak or a cheaper chicken, then I was good because that met my needs. But now I can't unlearn what I've learned. I
Yeah.
can't not know that I don't want to eat animals that are suffering. I don't want to have that experience. It's not who I choose to be. And I think these conversations are so important. And I am so grateful that you were so honest about in your answer about and enabled us to have this discussion and conversation because I think is very, very important. I wanted to, this is a little bit more selfish. I wanted to go back to the whole concept of talking to animals who have crossed over. I think, as I mentioned before we started recording, I'd lost my dog last November. And I think there's an element of me that doesn't know how to. I talk to him all the time, and he was my first animal. And there's elements of me that I could have been a better dog mummy in so many different ways. And I think that's very normal in general
Yeah.
to want to have learned from the experience. But what can somebody do to open themselves up to speak to an animal that may have crossed over?
Well, first of all, know that they are connected with you and you are connected with them. People disconnect and they go into their guilt. They run guilt trips on themselves. Oh, I could have done something different, or I could have been less impatient, or blah, blah, blah. And here, your dog friend is shining over you, feeling this incredible love. And so realize that as soon as you think of them, they're there. There are no limits in the spiritual realm. There isn't a time limit, there isn't a space limit. So you just think, and they're there. So when you say you have conversations with them, you're having conversations with them. Acknowledge that.
Good.
You are having conversations with them. So have conversations. Feel, but most of all, feel them because they have gifts for you. They have gifts of that love and compassion and sweetness and expansion and spiritual reality that they want to share with you and wisdom. They're like guides for you now if you let them. They can help you. So understand that it's really a natural thing. You can only stop yourself. So people get obviously naturally very much into their grief and all the stages of their grief. Understandable. And if you can allow some space to honor your connection with your beautiful animal friend who is still there with you, then you will have a different experience. I'm not saying you don't have to go through emotion. This is part of the human journey. We go through our losses and emotions. It's part of the journey. You'll feel it. If you don't feel it, then you're numb, so you'll feel it. And you can share with your animal friend. You can even say to them, yeah, I feel guilty that I didn't go to the vet 16 times. I only went 15 times. Only spent $10,000 instead of $20,000. I feel guilty about that. On it goes. And
I was a
your dog
smother
just
mother.
going, it all doesn't matter. I love you. I had such a beautiful life with you. We had a pact to be together. We grew together. We loved together. What could be better? I just had a trip with you and I'm continuing my journey with you. I thank you for connecting with me. They'll be very happy too. They just want you to know how much they love you. So
thank you for that.
And I've written my book, Animals in Spirit. I just put out a class on video on connecting with your animals in spirit. So there are ways to do it. And if you allow yourself, it helps. I'm not saying you won't hurt.
Yeah.
It's the way it is. And you'll evolve. You'll
Mm.
evolve with your animal friend and you'll feel their comfort. There's a
Yeah.
gift when your animal friend goes to the spiritual realm. If you accept it, you'll feel comforted. And then some animals go on, they reincarnate. Some will come back to you. Some have other journeys. They need to go other places or be in other species or stay in the spiritual realm longer or whatever it is. But some will come back to you. And if you listen, you'll find out.
Yeah. And I think it's important to be more present, really focusing on listening and how to listen better. Because if you're communicating with anyone, listening is just as important as talking. Right?
Yeah.
A couple more
Something else.
questions. So, my first question is, what's your definition of love?
Love is a state of being that is natural to our consciousness. It is actually what we are made of.
Mm.
And it's an expansive state of being that includes all things. There is also love as an emotion that we feel as an emotion toward people. It's a giving and a taking kind of thing. But I'm talking about love as a state of being where it encompasses everything. And I feel like it translates better because, again, we have so many definitions of love, translates better as compassion, as inclusion, as acceptance. Because when you include and you have compassion and you're accepting, what else do you feel but that state of love?
Yeah.
So if you sit there with people and just have compassion and acceptance, you can't help but love them. You feel that soul. And yes, they have all their contradictions as a human, as we all do. And that's okay too. Acceptance is a part of love. So that's how it feels to me, that love is actually a state that is natural to our being, that when we get centered in our being, when we get centered with the earth, with our bodies, that's what we feel. That open space that we usually can feel right from here, from the heart center, right here is the vast cosmos. That's what love is to me.
Oh, thank you for that. And last question, where can people work with you? Where can they find you? Any offerings you might have in terms of courses? Anything you want to share with the audience?
Thank you. So my website is animaltalk.net. And you'll find I'm giving courses, online courses. I'm doing work with the Shift Network, and there's a big course coming up. You also have evergreen courses that you can do, both foundation courses and more advanced courses. And I am not available for individual consultations. I have many offerings that help you to learn publications and a little program using the publications. And there's a lot of free material on my website and on YouTube that people get a lot of awarenesses of. I really feel like if you just watched the YouTube and read all the articles, you'd get it and you wouldn't need anything else. But it's nice to have a course, and get training too.
Yeah. For those people that feel they need a little bit more support. And there's also your books as well that are available on Amazon, right?
Yes. Books and the audio recordings and the videos.
Yes.
All those
So that
good
people
things.
could tap into your wisdom, which we need more of.
I would like people to be happy, and how do you get happy? You connect. Disconnection is a shrinking that hurts. And when we connect and we open and we feel the trees and the animals and other beings, it's beautiful. And that's what I would wish for other people. And yes, you have to work on your own journey and your own shadow and all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And face it. And it comes up for us all. As long as we have human bodies, we'll have the human program. And boy, it is filled with everything.
Yeah. So true. So true. Thank you so much, Penelope, for being on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. This was an amazing conversation. I cried, I laughed, I had all the emotions.
Thank you. You're such a beautiful, sweet, loving person. It's just a joy to connect with you. I feel like we've just spent time being friends together. So thank you.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so, so much. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone who tuned in to another episode of the Love and Compassion podcast with Gissele. Have a great day.